Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Story Coaching with me, your host, Charlotte McFarlane from The Writable. This is episode 4, and we are going to be talking about character arcs. A character arc is really all about the experience that the character goes through as they're going through the story. And when we're talking about the main character, or maybe you've got, two protagonists, this character arc really forms the backbone of the story that you're going to tell, and it parallels in a lot of ways story structure, and they're very interconnected. So we'll chat about that. But first, let's talk about what is an arc, who has an arc, and what we're really looking for as we're planning these arcs. So the first thing to understand is that there are two types of characters in every piece of fiction. There are the dynamic characters and fixed characters. And you can probably guess, a dynamic character is someone that will change over the course of the story, whereas a fixed character is someone that mostly just stays the same. So for a dynamic character, what that really looks like and what we're really looking at with a story arc is they're moving from an old behavior or old belief into a new behavior or a new belief. And if you remember back when we talked about theme, that's really what we're looking at. So at the core of your main story problem, we're always needing that main character to have a belief shift. And the belief shift really relates to the theme or the universal message that you want to share with the world. So that's going to become important in a few minutes when we talk about positive or negative arcs, or even flat arcs. Of course, a fixed character, they start with the old behavior or belief, and they end with the same behavior or belief. So again, some characters are going to have a belief shift, and some characters aren't. Your main character has to have a belief shift. That is the core here. The people around them, the supporting cast members, may or may not have a belief shift. And if they do, it is probably less significant than the one that the main character has, because that main character, their belief shift is the core of the whole story. All right, so when characters change, or when they have a belief shift, it can be in one of three ways. So they can have what's called a positive arc, where they have a flawed belief and that shifts into a beneficial belief. They can have a negative arc, which is where we take a beneficial belief and move them into a flawed belief. Or they can have what's called a flat arc, and we'll get deeper into this in a minute. But a flat arc is where they start with their original belief. That belief is challenged, and it might change through the story, or they might experiment with different beliefs or different behaviors. But in the end, they're going to come back to that original belief, and the belief is just going to be reaffirmed. It's going to be stronger. So positive, where they're moving from sort of a flawed to a more beneficial belief. A negative, where they're moving from a beneficial to a more flawed belief. Or in either of these cases, where they start with maybe they have a good belief to a better belief, or a bad belief to an even worse belief or behavior. And then the flat arc, where they do end up having the same belief or behavior, but usually it's a little bit stronger. It's reaffirmed for them through the process of the arc. So let's talk about that main character, about that protagonist again, because they are always going to have a dynamic arc. So they're going to have one of those three. And really what's important is that they move from an old belief to a new belief, and that can either be an improvement in belief and behavior, or a decline in belief and behavior. And that belief and behavior relates directly to your theme. So the opposite of the theme is typically going to be a belief that's holding them back from succeeding. And they're going to move into the theme, which is the belief that they need to succeed. That's at the core of that story problem. I think we chatted about that in a few episodes back in season 1. So there's already lots about that happening, but I really want to drive it home. Your character arc has a lot to. Your character arc is based on the belief shift and the behavior shift, which is based on the theme, which is the belief that they need to succeed at the story problem. Or the belief that they're going to develop if you've got a story that has a negative ending. So, all right. So in a positive arc, you are moving from a bad or a less beneficial belief into a beneficial belief, and that is how they succeed. The negative story arc, it is reversed. So they're still moving from an old behavior to a new behavior or belief, but you're usually starting with a belief that they need in order to succeed, and they're moving towards the opposite of the theme, which is a belief that's going to hold them back from succeeding. A prime example of this is like Walter White in Breaking Bad. So when he started, when the series started, he was a mild-mannered chemistry teacher. He loved his family, and he wanted to do everything to help support his family. And he started, of course, cooking meth in order to make money to support his family when he died. And I think a lot of us would argue, yes, being with family, working to support your family, those are very good, very positive beliefs, especially if you're dealing with something, like cancer. You need that support. And so we started with a good belief, but through the course of the entire series, that got very, very twisted, and we ended up so far from that original belief, and really in a belief that just led him through a world of problems and led to him. I think they did confirm that he died at the end. Sorry if that's a spoiler alert for you, but you've had however long to watch it. And he just became, he went so far from his original belief of supporting family. He loses his family. He wants his family to go away, and he develops this very different belief system where power is his primary concern. And so that's a really prime example of a negative arc, old behavior to a new behavior, but really in a negative or non-beneficial direction. Right. So again, all of those dynamic characters have the arcs. A flat arc is a little bit different. So some people confuse a fixed character with a flat arc, and I understand why, because a fixed character is going to have no belief change. They start with a belief and they end with the same belief. A character with a flat arc does the same thing. They start with a belief and they end with the same belief. The difference is in the challenging of the belief and the questioning of the belief. So with a fixed character, it's really just a straight line. They have the old behavior and they have the same behavior at the end. There's no questioning, there's no ups and downs. It just simply is. But with a flat arc, it's not flat at all. If you want to imagine, I usually imagine like a dip, like, an arrow going down, an arrow coming back up, where we start with the old behavior, and then we're going to have that behavior and belief be questioned. The character is going to try something different. They're going to probably struggle as you're making. If you want your book to work, they're going to struggle as they try the old belief, and eventually they're going to come back to the same behavior, the same belief. And what makes it really strong as a storytelling element is that it's really reaffirmed to them. I think that using a flat arc can be one of the best ways to show the power of a certain type of belief. because the character, again, is, they started with this belief, but they questioned it and they said there's probably a better way. And through the course of the story, they came back to that original belief and said, nope, this really is the best way. This, you might see this, kind of a common place where you might see it is in like an achievement story. So like the football player that is playing football, he wants to win, the cup at the end. I'm sorry, I don't understand sports. And he's playing football. Something happens and he says, I'm done with football, and he walks away. And then through the course of the story, he comes back to football and they go on to win the championship. As opposed to, so that would be a flat arc. If he was a fixed character, he would just play football throughout, no questioning of it. You might also see it, with any type of athlete who walks away from the training and comes back in that type of achievement story, or like an education story. Someone thinks they're going to quit school and then they go back to it. Very common to see a flat arc in those situations where they start in one situation and they come back, and that belief again is just going to be stronger. It's going to be reaffirmed for them. You might also see it in like an older like women's fiction, or an older like romance fiction where a couple splits and then they come back together, that type of thing, right? So that's really what we're looking at with character arcs. And as you are putting your story together, a character arc becomes very important because, again, it is at the center of that backbone of story. And what we need to do is we need to figure out how to move a character from their old belief to their new belief, or how they're going to question it and come back to it. And what I do, and we go over this very intensely in the story planning guide and in the Right Now program especially, is we want to break down the baby steps between belief A and belief B. What are all of the situations that arise that cause a person to question their old belief? What are the situations that help them start to realize or start to move into the new belief? So for example, if we were talking about our fictitious football story, the football player is, he's playing, he's on that belief system, doing that behavior, and something happens. So the coach comes to him and says, you got to step it up, or they lose a game and things don't look like they're going to be going well. And whatever else is going on in his life, he says, I'm walking away from football. I'm done. And, so we need a baby step that pushes him out of the old belief. And we see that in a positive arc and in a negative arc too. That is usually, what's called the key event, where they're stepping into, quote, the new world, and they're realizing that the old belief doesn't work. So, in the negative arc, Walter White, Breaking Bad, it's been a long time since I've seen it, so sorry, but he starts to, I think, just realize how much, probably the first one is when he meets Jesse Pinkman and realizes how much money he can make by cooking methamphetamine. And that causes him to question his old belief, which is him being kind of the average guy with a family and a high school teacher and that sort of thing. Pushes him out of his comfort zone. In a positive arc, let's look at the Hunger Games, because that's probably where I'm most familiar with. Katniss is forced to, these are actually inciting incidents that I'm talking about, but she's forced to decide to go into the Hunger Games, which is something she never wanted, in order to save her sister. So she started with a belief of avoid, considering running away. She started with that belief, and then something happened and she said, oh shoot, I have to go. and that just, push them out of the normal everyday belief into something new. And then we can have a series of events. So maybe the football player, he gets kicked out of the house because he was living with a bunch of football teammates. His girlfriend breaks up with him because now he's couch surfing in her apartment, and he's become kind of a schlub because he has no goal without football. And then his, some other things happen. His parents are involved, and then something's gonna come in and change, usually around the midpoint for any story, that really forces them to choose one direction or the other. And so for our football player, because this is a flat arc, he's gone down, now he's going to have to start going back up. And so he's going to start basically undoing the mess that he's made. He's going to get his own apartment. He's going to make amends with his girlfriend, make amends with his parents. And finally, he's going to make amends with his football friends. And he's going to recognize how much he loves football, and he's going to reaffirm to football. He's going to go back and he's going to make amends with the coach, and the coach is going to bring him in and tell him that he's such a good player, and the reason he's hard on him is because he's so good and has so much potential. So now all of a sudden the football player understands and reaffirms that he loves football and he's got to work hard. That's kind of that I mean really is what you're looking at. And so all of those little events, now we plug them into story structure, and that becomes the backbone of our story. And that is all of the events, as well as all of the emotional and mental highs and lows that we need to move the character through in order for them to have the belief change or reaffirmation of the belief and succeed with the story problem. Or in the case of the negative arc with Walter White, to just crash and burn spectacularly because his beliefs have shifted so far from anything that would be beneficial to him, that he's just creating this huge mess. And in the end, I mean, fire, shootout, death, blood, just a mess, right? So that is really kind of the quickie course on character arcs and how you use them. We do talk about these more in the Right Now program, so if that's something that you're interested in, the wait list is always open, but we only take, I only really open it up for registration twice a year, so you can jump on that wait list. Otherwise, I do have a quick little exercise for you guys. This comes right out of Right Now for you. So we can just, I'll ask the questions if you want. Let me think, where am I going to put it? If you're listening to the audio, you can see the slides. I post them up on YouTube as I go through this, so you can see the slide there. And you know what? I'll just copy and paste the questions into the episode notes, so you can see them there too. Easy, right? All right. So, which characters? So the first thing that you want to do with character arcs is decide which characters are going to experience a belief change and how do they change. So definitely your protagonist, your main character, is going to experience a belief change. If you're writing, particularly a romance where you've actually got two leads, they're both going to have to experience a belief change in order to come together. You may decide that some of your supporting characters also are going to have belief changes. They might be smaller. They may or may not relate to the theme. Maybe you've got a friend who, friend of the main character who wants to pursue acrobatics as a career, and through the course of the series, they change their mind. They decide that they want something different. I don't know. You can have big changes. Your main character probably needs a pretty big change in order to carry the story. But you can have changes in lots of other characters, and they can be big as well, or they can be small. What's important is just to define who's going to have a belief change and how do they change. So really what you're doing is you're identifying who's dynamic, who's fixed. And if they're fixed, don't worry about it. They don't have an arc, so you don't need to think about the rest of these questions. But if it is a dynamic character, you want to know, what is their starting belief? And what do they believe by the end? And does the belief that they have in the end, does it help or hinder them? Meaning, are they going to have a positive arc or a negative arc? Or is it going to be a flat arc where maybe they're not helped or hindered, but they carry on with life as usual? Usually with a better sense of satisfaction with their life. So once we have the starting belief and the end belief, we want to know, why do they believe the starting belief? And this is really all about backstories. So why do they, what has happened in their life, especially if you're aiming for a positive arc and you're starting them with a flawed belief, what has happened in their life that they have this flawed belief? Why does, in the Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen, she has a belief that she should not go into the Hunger Games because she'll die, because she's seen the Hunger Games play out her entire life, and that's kind of how it goes, right? So that's a pretty simple one, but you might have something much more complex depending on what belief you're looking at. And then, most importantly, what needs to happen in order for them to question the belief and then to change their belief. And this is really those micro steps that we're talking about. So what is the thing that suggests to them, hey, maybe this isn't working? And what's the series of events that's going to happen that would realistically drive them in baby steps to the new belief? All right, so that is it for this episode for character arcs. I want to remind you, if you are interested in joining the Right Now waitlist, it's thewritable.com/rightnow. Or there's also the free story planning guide, and as you go through that, you drop your email and it sends it to you, but then there'll also be links to join the waitlist that show up for you as well. And that is available at thewritable.com/story planning guide. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I hope that this episode on character arcs maybe has cleared some things up for you about character arcs. I hear a lot of questions. I hear a lot of different things. So I wanted to put this episode together for you. So hopefully it's cleared that up, and hopefully will give you a little bit more structure as you're starting to think about your main character and how they are going to fit into the story, as well as how to build that backbone of your story, because it really is all about the belief shift. And that belief shift is really about the micro steps that it takes to move a character from A to B. All right, thank you so much. I will see you next week. Next week we are talking about fixing character problems, so should be a good episode, and I will see you there.